Hey guys, Brandon Boyd here. Today we're going to quarter up and bone out a blacktail buck. That's a nice mature buck I shot yesterday, and I'm going to walk you through the process of how I debone and break down a carcass like this and what I can do with it. You could do this in the woods, you could do this at home. It's obviously nicer if you can get the animal at home and clean it and keep it clean. So today we're going to walk through how I do this step by step, and hopefully you can pick up on some things that you can add to your toolbox of things that you like to do. We're going to go through some of the tools, some of the things I like to have on hand when I'm doing something like this. If you guys are interested in this type of thing where you're breaking down animals, maybe butchering your own farm animals, game, subscribe to my channel. I'm always quick to get on the comments. If you guys have comments, questions, as long as they're positive, I will answer them. Then, of course, I have a nice crane hoist that I put up, Harbor Freight. It's pretty cheap, best investment you'll ever make if you do any game butchering at home. So this is a good way to step by step go through it, save yourself some money, and do it yourself. Enjoy. One of the things I really like to have on hand is a hot water bath with some soap in it, and I just have this on a burner here, just kind of keeping it warm. Throw a rag in there and it gives you a place to wash your hands, keep them clean as you're doing this. Sometimes you get a little bit of dried fat on there or blood. It's an easy way to keep things clean, wash my knives off as they get kind of scuzzy with fat on them and dried blood and things like that. So when I'm breaking down any game or animal, I like to have some quality butcher knives. I actually have, this is a boning knife. It's got a little flex on it. You can actually follow bone with it. If you've seen any of my videos, you'll see this is kind of my workhorse. This breaking knife, this is a knife I actually enjoy using to get in if you need to get deeper in a cut, or if you just want a nice long slice. This knife works very well for that. So we've got our breaking knife, our boning knife. I have a sharpening steel here. A quality steel is good. You know, when you sharpen your knives, you're just giving them a kind of a touch up. You don't wait until they're dull. And then I have this ceramic one that I actually made. I turn the handle on the lathe, put a strap on it there so you can hook it to your belt. And it really gives a nice fine edge when you're sharpening. Another thing I enjoy using is the old cleaver here. This is an old cleaver. It was my grandfather's. It's heavy. I actually keep it pretty sharp. And a cheap rubber mallet, one that washes well in bleach, is also something that's nice to use. And so I got this at Harbor Freight for like $5. It's actually a pretty good deal. So if you wanted to, let's say, cut through the pelvis with this, you could actually hammer through the pelvis with that mallet and this. Today we might use a bone saw depending on how tough that pelvis bone is. Another thing I like to have are tubs. These tubs are easy to clean and bleach when you're done. It's a nice way to keep things kind of tidy around here. This is just a table I use in my shop. I'm a woodworker, so I have a setup table that I can do glue ups on. I just cover it with butcher paper, wax side up, and tape it down. Gives me a nice clean surface to work on. I can clean it up by ripping it off and burn it later. Also like to have a trash can so I can throw the bones and scraps that I'm not using in the trash can. Makes it easy, then I can get rid of that. Okay, so the first step, we are going to remove the shoulders. And how we do that is each shoulder, I've cut some of this meat away from the bloodshot when I shot this with my arrow. So the shoulders, they're not actually connected in a socket, so you can take your knife and just cut right up through there. You just work underneath the shoulder blade there. And there we have the shoulder section off of this side. Okay, so now we can remove this shoulder, and this one I haven't separated already, so really you can just take your knife, cut right through there, give it a little pull as you go. Okay, so there we have the shoulder. Now, a lot of this meat is neck meat on here and things like that, and you're going to cut that up anyhow, so it doesn't matter. Somewhere under all of this back fat is a really nice back strap. Now, when you're cutting the back strap out, whether you're in the woods or in the shop, I like to go a little liberal than what the actual back strap size is here. And so if this is the hump of the shoulder and we know this is about the end of the pelvis here, I like to cut just a little higher than that across. And the same here, I'll cut a little lower than the shoulder. And I'd rather get all the back strap than miss and leave part of it that ends up as chunks for your stew. So what we do is we would cut across here. So let's make our cut there, and we'll just cut right into the spine. And I'll do the same on the other side since I'm here. Okay, and then now we know that the hip bone is right up in here. So I'm actually going to cut across that back fat and see where we come out here. Okay, so now we have our cuts on both sides. Now you have to pick on the side of the spine, so we know the spine runs right down this center mark here. Okay, so what we want to do is get our knife in there as close as you can to the spine and just cut a straight line. So we are picking right along that spine here, and you can see my knife's flexing. I'm touching that spine, and I'm just gonna cut right along that spine, kind of hitting each rib. All the way down to there. All right, run it one more time. And then if we come up here, you can see I've hit the bone there for the hip. All right, so now what we can do is we can come in and cut up, because that that back strap's gonna sit and kind of curl down. So like I said, liberally, I like to come down along the ribs here and just hit the ribs. Just like that. Now you can kind of start working your strap out. Get your knife in there. And then we're just gonna cut and peel. Now this guy's got a layer of fat on him. Okay. And you want to take your time so you get all the meat off the bone and you don't end up with half of a back strap. Now, I'm about to the corner of the spine and the ribs there. And so I just keep taking my knife, following the ribs, following this cut. There we have it. Our deer backstrap with a healthy amount of fat on it. Okay, same thing, taking this backstrap out. So we've got our cut going across the top here. We're going to come down and follow the spine. Okay, I'm going to come down and follow along the ribs here. So We can work our way up here. There we go. So that's both back straps out. You can see there's a little bit of a split in the muscle there, so that's getting down towards the neck. And this is all the back strap here, and then it does end about here. So this is an extra meat off the hip actually. And we're right on the spine, right next to the ribs, which is a pretty clean and efficient way to do it. So now you can put them in the tub. So now that we're down to the neck, you're basically just tearing this neck right off of the bone. There are some kind of thick tendons here in the neck that help the deer hold its head up with the rack on it. So what I'm going to do is just kind of bone through this quickly, and we'll probably speed up the video. But you can see there's still some bloodshot meat there, and I'll pick that off after I get everything out of here. So there's still some shoulder meat here, and after that you have whatever rib meat you want, and then we'll get up into here and we'll get the tenderloins. So this will just be cutting meat off the neck, boning it, and I usually just try to run right down the middle of the spine and just hug the bone. So that's one side of the neck, and then as you're going through, obviously you can pick out and get whatever chunks of things you don't want on your meat. So you want to try to pick your carcass as clean as you can. There is meat between here, but boy, you really got to pick to get some of that stuff. So this is bone here, that's bone, bone. So when you're picking it out, you know, you could work this. You could actually cut this off, this neck, and you can boil it and make a stock out of it. So just remember when you're cutting around neck, there is a lot of meat that just kind of sticks to the bone. All right, so the next step to this process is we're going to remove as much rib meat as we can, and that'll go into our grind. So because I don't have a hamburger grinder, so I usually cut chunks of meat for stews, or in this case, a lot of this grind is going to go into pepperoni. So what I like to do is we'll just start here, and we'll cut right along this little flap. If you can see here, there is a flap that goes down into here. So we're just going to follow that flap to there. And we want to make sure we don't cut the tenderloin there. And then I'll just follow the last rib up. Where is that? Right there. All right, so what we're looking at here, we've removed kind of this flank meat from the side, and we have the tenderloins here, which everybody values their tenderloin. And what we're going to do is we're just going to remove what fat is inside this carcass. And then when it comes to the tenderloins, they just kind of sit right here. And a lot of times what you can do is you can get your finger worked right in behind the tenderloin and separate it out. So you can just run right along the rib there And then that tenderloin sits right along the spine here. Take my thumb and push it in there. Just like that. And then you can grab your knife and follow it. Just cut it across the bottom. And follow the bone. There we go. And I just cut it right at the top end of it, right there. And there's our tenderloin. We can trim it up when we're done. So when you're taking the tenderloin out, you want to make sure that when you take the flank meat off, that you don't cut into the tenderloin and cut it in half. So what I did was when I cut this flank out, I followed this edge, and you can see there's these little chunks of the spine here that kind of protect that tenderloin. So you don't go into the spine when you're cutting that flank meat. You just run along the edge of it. And then you'll get a nice solid tenderloin out. What we're gonna do is take this tenderloin out, and I'm just gonna work it out just like I did the last one. Okay, now we have the other tenderloin out. When it comes to removing the rib meat, I basically take it off like a sheet, and then you can pick in between the ribs if you want. If you wanted to make ribs for your barbecue, you could do that, but you'd have to saw through them and make your cut. But this is basically boning out, so we're just gonna take it all off as a sheet and then deal with it on the table. Okay, so we've got a sheet of meat. We got the ribs to pick out. I got a little bit of meat there. All right, so that's how you bone out the ribs and get pretty much all the meat off the carcass up to the hip joint. I'm going to work on this other side, and we'll be back with you in a minute. Now we have a clean carcass. So what we're going to do is remove the spine and the ribs, and I brought the meat saw with me, and we're just going to stick it right here. All right, we're down to sectioning out these hindquarters, and what I like to do is cut a line, and in between this, what I did was washed my knives, washed my hands. So when you're cutting this line, you're cutting where you're either gonna take your cleaver or your saw. So I'm gonna use this breaking knife, and I'm just running it right down between the legs there. And then I'm going down the spine, since this guy has so much fat. I'll cut it right there. There's a chunk of tailbone on the back side here, and sometimes it's handy if you can just cut that tailbone out. I don't know if I got it. There we go. There's the tailbone out. Okay, so I'm gonna take my cleaver, gonna take my mallet. All right, we're down into there. So I'm gonna see if we can split down through here. There we go. So obviously a saw is a cleaner cut when you're doing this, but if all you have are some easier tools like a cleaver and a mallet, you can hack it in half. And since we're deboning, it doesn't really matter if the bone comes out pretty. Real quickly here, I wanted to talk about the back straps. Now that I've separated all the extra layers of muscle that wrapped around them and the fat is now removed from them, which I was able to just kind of peel off like a fish skin. So this is what you should be left with, is a nice lean piece of meat that is one section of muscle. So when you cut it, you have one section of muscle. There's not a sinew line separating it. It makes your steak better if you don't have that silver skin or sinew in the middle of it when you're chewing on your steak. I like to have nice steaks that I can do. If I was cutting these into steaks, I would probably cut them about 1 inch thick, so they're still moist when you grill them or if you pan fry them, I guess. But this is kind of how I like my backstrap to turn out, is nice and lean cut. I'll probably trim a little bit more off of them as I go, but once I was ripping these down, getting ready to put these in the fridge, this is what I'm looking for. Okay, now we're ready to start boning. So here is a shoulder. We got a big chunk of fat there, pretty much. We can take that off soon. We're gonna take our boning knife, and first I like to just get rid of this forearm meat, and so we're just gonna follow the bone. Just run right along the bone. And that's pretty much a tendon there. Cut around that. All right, we got that off. Now we're gonna do the same thing over here. And in the front leg here, this tendon's pretty thick, so you can leave that bottom chunk off of it. Looked it over, going back, following our cut again. And I'm cutting anything with a heavy tendons out before I take the meat off, so you can see that's a pretty heavy tendon in there. We'll dice that out of there when we cut it up. So now we're down to pretty much, we have the shin bone here, and it's all removed. Now if you wanted to, you could cut the bone away, but it's kind of a waste of time. So what we're going to do is just open this up so you can see it a little better. And a lot of this shoulder meat on a deer pretty much goes to grind or cube or whatever you want to do with it. I'm just trying to get it a little more open so you can see the muscle groups here. Okay. So as you look at this, this bone goes here, and then you've got the bone that comes up to here. All right, and then there's a ball here where that moves, and then this scapula shoulder blade is right here. So if we take this shoulder blade and we trim this meat right off of it, Okay, so there's your shoulder blade, right? Now I'm just gonna cut along the shoulder blade here. And then I'm just gonna run my knife right along the bone there. Okay, and there's the shoulder blade edge there too. So we're lifting that out of there. Now I'm gonna take from here, I'm just gonna follow this bone right up. Okay, and then there's the kind of the elbow of the front leg here. I'm just gonna work in to it and come out right behind it. There's a pretty heavy tendon right there. And then we can take our knife and just run right along the bone here. I'm gonna pick it up, tuck my knife in under the bone. Now we're meeting where we already cut, where that shoulder or scapula is. And I just kind of pick the bone up and let your knife do the walking right along the bone there. The scapula has a little dividing line in it. And so what I did was we took the knife up to the dividing line, taking it there. All right, now follow the bone some more. We're pretty much down to this one ball joint here. And right there. So now we have a boned out shoulder, just like that. So when you break this down, you do have meat groups in here. You could make a roast. There's another one right here in the shoulder. You can take this and just put your thumb in between where you feel that silver skin sit, and then trim. Okay? So what I'm going to do, take my knife and cut that right there. We'll cut that out. Cut that out. Okay. Now we've got a pretty good meat group here, or muscle group. I'll trim a little bit of trim off of there and take our big breaking knife. We can make one big cut across there. And then you have a roast out of the shoulder there. It does have a little bit of, you know, connective tissues in it and stuff like that. If you slow roast it, it'll fall apart. So it's a good time. You can just trim it right up. So you've got a nice roast, or something like this. I would actually lay it down on the table, get a fillet knife, and cut jerky strips out of it, and you make some nice deer jerky. So that's how quick a front shoulder will bone out. You can take, if you got fat in there, you can take your fat out. A lot of times you can work it out with your hands, but it's usually just as quick to cut it with a knife. There, we trim that down pretty quick. And we can cut this up, put it in your burger, whichever. Trim out what you want off of it. I don't really like a whole lot of fat from my venison. So that's that piece. This was a piece over the shoulder. It's a pretty decent piece of meat too. This is another great place to get some jerky out of this meat. And I'm only breaking these muscle groups down so you can see them. So this was kind of the shield covering the scapula there. So there's that muscle group. I'll trim these down later. And then this is kind of a cluster of muscle groups there for connective tissue in that shoulder. All right, so we had quite a group of meat come out of there. So that's how you do a front shoulder. Now we're going to debone the hindquarter. So when you're dealing with the hindquarter, you have the bone that goes up to the knee, and then the knee goes up to a ball right here, and then you have the whole pelvis here. And so what we're going to do is kind of the same as the shoulder. We're going to remove the lower portion of the leg, and then we're going to follow some muscle groups, and I'll try to split those out for you just to show you how I would take it apart. Now if you're in the woods and you're trying to just bone out your deer or elk and get it in your bags and packed out, you're probably best to just strip the bone right on out and follow the bone channel and lay this big chunk of meat out, wrap it up in your bag, stick it in your pack, and get out of there. So my first step is this big tendon where you hang your deer from. If you're out here on the west, you hang them from the feet usually. So we're just going to cut that right out of our way here. And then I don't have to worry about it. I don't even know if I can cut through this thing. There we go. And so now we don't have to worry about that big tendon, but we're going to do basically the same thing with the front shoulder, lower arm, and that knee's right here. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut straight down through there. And then I just take my knife and actually just follow up the bone. Try to do this so the camera can see it here. So there you've got a muscle group, and it's got all kinds of silver skin and sinew in it. When you peel it apart here, you can see there's a lot of tendons. So you'll kind of be a little picky as you go through there and get out some of the heavy stuff. Stuff that makes you really need a toothpick if you're chewing on it. Okay, so there's that kind of the front shin of that back leg. Now if you look, we're pretty clean on this bone, and we're going to leave that bone in. You could probably pop it across the knee and break it out if you wanted to. So next what we're going to cut is we're going to cut, if you look and follow this bone, it kind of disappears here into the meat, and this is all soft here. And so we know that ball joint is right here. So between there is pretty much that bone. So what we're going to do is just feel real quick. Stick your knife in there. And I just follow that bone. And we can kind of cut around that ball a little bit right there until you really see you've got good bone. Now we can cut right here up through this towards that kneecap, and then there's a big tendon right here, and so I just try to avoid it. Now you can see we've got meat peeling right off the bone, so take our knife, get it right along that bone, that channel in there. Okay, now this is where, if you're doing it all in one chunk here, you got to follow the hip bone with your knife. Okay, and so I followed that edge, and I'm actually loose in between here. We can probably just cut this scrap meat off here real quick. Okay, you see how this moves a little bit? It's a little soft here, and then that bone comes down along here. There's a little bone shard from us hacking that out. So what I'm doing is I'm just feeling and following. And we're gonna turn this so you can see. We're just gonna follow along this pelvis. And what I really am aiming for is to get this pelvis free here. And so you see I'm working right along it. And it kind of comes down a little bit. And we're almost there. There we are. We've got the pelvis is completely free. All right, now it's just kind of swiveling right around on that hip bone. So I kind of pre-cut that ball on the top, and there's our pelvis is out. And we're pretty free of meat, really. So in the barrel. Now we are down to just removing this ball joint of the leg. So we're just gonna, again, follow the bone. And there's a lot of connective tendons and tissues right here. So you just kind of do your best to cut them out. There we have it. So there's a little bit of meat right there. We can hack that piece off. There we go. I'd say we've got a pretty darn good cleaned up bone. This bone does have, like I said, there's the ball. It does have quite a tendon clump around that ball, you know, as that back leg's moving. So, but a lot of this meat here, right around this joint, is really tendon rich. So you can grind it, but you will get little hard chunks of tendon in your grind. So we are done with that. Now look at that. We have a fully boned hindquarter. Okay? So from this, we're going to separate some muscle out. And just you can see the muscle groups. Now they're divided kind of in threes here. So I'm just pulling them apart. And then what we're going to do is we'll just take a knife and separate them. All right, so here's one muscle group here. If you can see that, I'm just going to cut it right down that fat line. And there it is there. Now this muscle is actually 2 or 3 or 4, who knows, different muscles here. So what I'm doing is separating them, and then you can decide what you want to do with them. And you don't have to pull them apart. You can use your knife and just cut them, but I'm doing this so you can see the group. All right, so there's kind of what was left that was connected to the hip bone, pelvis bone. Now you've got this nice big muscle here, and you can see there's a little bit more of a different muscle connected to it. Okay, so there you go. You got a really nice roast. A lot of times what I like to do with this is take this, chuck, make some steaks out of it. So we'll put that there. Now, cut this out. Okay, so here is your next big muscle group. So if you look here, we've got this seam where the two muscles come together. And I'm just going to open that up a little bit here. And then we're going to cut some of those. And we'll cut this away. Okay. So now we can cut this. So there's your next big muscle group, which you can make steaks out of. You can make a big roast out of it, jerky, whichever. Really, the hindquarter on a deer is a pretty useful piece of meat. You can get a lot of good pieces out of it for different uses. And so I just kind of trim it up best that I can. And we've got that. And again, once you get these sections of different muscle off of it, you have kind of two different steaks here. You can see there's a light silver skin line down there. You can just make one nice steak cut out of that if you want. And then down to this last piece, which has this little part of the knee muscle still attached to it here. And then this is your last big muscle group. So you've got this muscle that's connected here. And we're just going to cut right down through there, get it out. And now, wow, that's a lot of fat. So now you have this muscle, which again, steaks, roasts, whatever you wanted to do. There are some heavy tendons along the edge of this. So you have a choice to make steaks, roasts, jerky, stew, whatever you like out of this. So I hope this is able to help you at least gain some knowledge of how I do this. Maybe if you do this already, you can add this to your bag of tricks. But this is really the process I would use to break down a deer or elk or even a bear. With sheep and goats, I don't mind doing bone in. With wild game, I usually take the bone out. It can cause a little bit of flavor distortion if you cook it in the oven or in a crock pot or something like that. And really, in some states, you don't want to be hauling bones here and there, you know, with diseases out there in the Midwest and even out here in the West. It's best to just take the muscle groups back with you. So if you leave the bones where you shot the animal, you're not spreading disease. So anyhow, I'll get to work on the rest of these, but I hope this was informational for you. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. All those subscribes help me out, and it'll help me build my channel into something bigger maybe. So thank you. Have a great day.